Welcome everyone to section 1.2 in Algebra 2, writing linear equations. So the learning target is that students will be able to write linear equations. So let's start out with just finding the slope. So a little bit of review from 1.1. So finding the slope between -1, 2 and 3, 9. If you recall, the slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And really, which one is y2 or x1 comma y1 of these points, and which one's the x2 comma y2 doesn't really matter. Just pick one. I always try to pick the bigger y to be the y2, just so that way I'm doing a bigger minus a small number. So because of that, I'm actually going to pick the second one to be y2 and x2, and the first one to be x1 comma y1. But however you do it is fine. So then we'll do m equals, and we'll plug it in, 9 minus 2 over 3 minus a -1. On the top, 9 minus 2 is 7. On the bottom, 3 minus a -1 changes to addition, and you get 4. 7 to 4 does not simplify, so that is your answer. Number 2, identify the slope and y-intercept. So this is a horizontal line, no rise, only running. If you recall, the slope of a horizontal line is 0 for z. So the m, where the slope is 0, and the y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis, is -1, which is actually the equation line, which you don't have to write down, but it's just y equals -1, because every way across there, it's always -1. All right, so on to the new stuff. So we need, let's say we're given a slope and a y-intercept. So we'd use slope-intercept form. We're very familiar with it. Overall, it's y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope, and b is the y-intercept. So let's go through these 4 examples here, A, B, C, and D. So starting off with A, you're told that the slope is 3/4, and the y-intercept, or the b, is 1. So you start plugging it in. Y equals 3/4 x plus 1. And that's it. So you replace the m, you replace the b, and then y and x stay y and x. Letter B, same idea. And real quick before I continue on these, if you're working on these on your own, it might be a good idea to pause the video and then work on these 3, or work on just maybe letter B, and then continue when you're done and see if you did it right, and keep going from there. All right, letter B, y equals -2/3, since that's the m, times x plus 5/3 for the b. Letter C, the m is 0, so a slight change there. So let's plug this in. Y equals 0 times x plus 3, but we know that 0 times x is just 0, and we don't even have to write the 0 plus 3. We just write y equals 3. That would be a lot like the equation we had up here on number 2, whereas y equals -1 when there is a slope of 0. Whenever you have a slope of 0, aka a horizontal line, it'll always, always, always be y equals whatever number the y-intercept is, 100% of the time, and that's it. Letter D, the reverse. This time the y-intercept is 0, but the slope is a number. So we'll plug this in. Y equals 7x plus 0. You don't really have to write the plus 0 though, so you just have y equals 7x. And you would assume, if you see that written down, that the plus is a plus 0, so the y-intercept is 0. Continuing on, writing a linear equation given a line. So on the first 4 examples, we were given the slope and the y-intercept. This time we're going to have to find the slope and the y-intercept. So on letter A, we can see that the y-intercept is right there. So that's b equals -2. So that's 1, 2 down. The slope, pick that point and pick any other point. So you could pick this point, for example. I'm just picking somewhere where it's exactly on a little crosshair there, where 2 grids meet up. You don't want to pick like something like that, where it's, you're kind of guessing where it is. So I count my rise and run. So it rises positive 2, and it runs negative 1. So the slope is rise over run 2 over negative 1, aka negative 2. That makes the equation y equals negative 2x minus 2. So really all it is from example 1 with those 4, you just have to do the extra step of actually finding the m and the b, the slope and the y-intercept. Letter B here is going to be a little more difficult. Let's actually start with the slope on this one. So let's say this point and this point exist. There's also here and here if you really wanted. Any two would work. It rises 1 and it runs 3, and those are both positive. So the m is 1 over 3. Now for the y-intercept, it's a little trickier. I feel like it's not really quite on across there, so we're going to be estimating, unfortunately. So we know it's 1, 2 up, so it's going to be 2 and something, because it's not quite to 3. So we say, okay, well, how far above 2 is it? How much of the way? And I'm going to estimate this one. It's saying, oh, it's about 0.4 of the way up, aka just under half of the way up. So then I'll write my equation from there. Y equals 1/3 x plus 2.4. So that kind of brings us to this question of, well, Mr. Kossel, do we just estimate that all the time? You know, in math a lot, we're told not to just estimate. We're told that we have to, go through a certain procedure and things like that. So why are we just estimating there? And that's a great question, because typically we won't estimate. We're just doing it for that quick example, just to show you that, hey, there's kind of an issue there, isn't there? So on this next page of the notes, page 8, we're going to see what you do in that scenario. So there's going to be 3 steps if you're given a point and a slope. So you're not given your y-intercept like you were on all 4 parts of example 1 and the first part of example 2. So your first step is you take your original equation, your y equals mx plus b, and you replace x and y, that's my little and symbol, in the equation y equals mx plus b, so those get substituted out or swapped out with values from the given point. So you'll be told, hey, this point is on the line. And that is the point we're talking about. Your step 2 is to solve for b, to find that y-intercept that you're not given. So that it would be in this example, we're going to find what we estimated as 2.4. We're going to find out what it actually is exactly. And then, last but not least, the third step is we're going to plug m and b back into y equals mx plus b like we were doing with those first example problems and the example 2 problems as well. So really what this is we're going to have to go even more distance and do a little more work than we did on example 2 to figure out the b, but we'll be given m. So, and this is a quick little reminder that, hey, when you're writing your final equation in the y equals mx plus b form, you should have the x and the y in the equation still. The only numbers that should be replaced are the m and the b. So on example 3, we're writing an equation of a line through the given point. So I was talking about given point with the given slope. So on A, we're told it's going through 3, 8. So that is the given point, and the slope is negative 1. So that's our m, and this is our x, y for now. So what you do is you take the equation y equals mx plus b, and you don't have to write out that little base form there like I just did. I'm doing it to show you what I'm doing here. If you want to write it out, that's more than fine. So I'm going to replace y with the 8, because that's the y value and the point it's going through. The m with the negative 1, because that's the slope. The x with the 3, because that's the x value of that point. Plus b. We don't know what b is, we're going to leave it there. Now, I do want to clarify real quick that I had a little sloppy handwriting issue there. That is -1, not plus. So now we'll have 8 equals, and now we just simplify. So -1 times 3, -3 plus b. And continue solving for b by adding 3 to both sides. And 11 is equal to b. So now we're finally at the point where we were for other equations earlier, where we know m and b. So we take the original equation, y equals mx plus b, and we plug m and b in, but not x and y. So y equals -1x plus 11. Or you could write it as y equals -x plus 11, because you assume that there's a 1 there even though you don't see it. Most commonly, you'll probably see it written this way, though this way is not wrong. All right, let's kind of show what we're, the same thing on on letter B here. And once again, this might be a good place to kind of pause it if you are wanting to try one on your own. So we're given our x comma y for our 3 comma -1, and the m is 3 over 8. But we don't know b, so that's what we're still trying to figure out. So for my original y equals mx plus b, right there, we're going to throw in or substitute in -1 for the y, 3/8 for the m, because that's my actual m, and 3 for my x, because that's the x to the point I have, plus b, because I don't know that. Now I'm going to call this 3 over 1, just to make my life easier as I'm multiplying two fractions together there. So as I multiply those together, there's no reducing I can do between 3 and 8, unfortunately. So I'm just going to multiply straight across. 3 times 3 leaves us 9 on the top. 8 times 1 is 8. Now we subtract the 9/8, and you'll want to get common denominators there for that. A good idea might be to do that work off to the side. That's often what I do when I do math, is work like that I don't need to be right in the problem, but might still need done. I do it off to the side. So like -1 minus 9 over 8. Well, -1 over 1. I'm doing it up here in case you haven't noticed. I'm going to multiply this fraction by 8 and by 8. And so that's going to give me -8 over 8 minus 9 over 8. So -8 minus 9 is -17 over 8 then. So that's what that turns into down here. And that is what's equal to b. So that's what I was trying to find up here, and I finally found it. Now that we have the m and the b, we're able to plug it back in into y equals mx plus b, and get y equals 3/8 x plus, or you could put minus 17 over 8. If you put plus, you'd have to put a negative 17 over 8. So quick recap of what happened there is, since we are given the point and the slope, we need to find the y-intercept. So in order to do that, we take what we know, the x, the y, and the m, we plug them into y equals mx plus b, as you see right here, and we solve for what we didn't know, b. From there, you're really just solving an algebra equation. So we multiplied, then we subtracted, which we did the work for that over there, and got our answer. So from there, we knew our m and our b, and those are like example 1 problems from last page, where we got this answer. On to example C. Through 3 comma -1 and slope equals 0. Once again, might be a good time to just kind of, hey, do this on your own real quick and see where and see how you do, and then continue the video. So you're given your x comma y, and you're given your m. Now you might notice something right away here. If you do, awesome, you're on a great track. If you don't, that's okay. We're going to keep working through it and then point out what happened or what other people might have noticed at the end. So start this the same way. We have x, y, and m. We don't have b, so let's find b. So -1 for y equals 0 for the slope times 3 for the x. So that's y equals mx plus b. Negative 1 equals 0 times 3 is 0 plus b, so negative 1 is b. So now we can take the m and the b, since we found the b, and plug it in. To y equals 0 times x minus 1, or plus a negative 1, which gives us 0 times x is 0, so we just have y equals negative 1, because 0 minus 1 is negative 1. Now you might have noticed earlier that, hey, this is another problem where the slope was equal to 0. And every single time the slope is equal to 0, it'll always be an equation where it's y equals some number. And that number will be the y value of the intercept, like we said earlier, the y-intercept, but it'll also be the same y value as any point on the line. So since that had negative 1 as the y value, you could have just jumped right to the answer right off the get-go, just knowing, hey, the slope is 0, a y value is negative 1. Y equals negative 1, I'm done. And you can skip all of that work if you catch that. If you don't, this method still works, which we just showed here. All right, continuing on to our last couple examples. Before that, we're going to talk about writing a linear equation given 2 points. So let's say you're not given your slope this time. Every time before we've either been given our slope or we're able to find it on a graph. This time, we're going to have to find it using the formula m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Then we're going to use a slope and 1 point, and I'm emphasizing that on purpose, to solve for b using y equals mx plus b. And 3, finally write the equation by replacing m and b in y equals mx plus b. Now I want to point out that steps 2 and 3 are what we did here. Step 2 specifically is steps 1 and 2 combined from earlier. So all we're really adding to what we just did on those 3 examples right here is step 1, where we're finding the slope m using the formula. It's the only thing we're adding to this. And once again, this is what you do when you're given 2 points. So example 4, write the equation of a line that passes through the points 5, negative 2 and 2, 10. So we're given 2 points, no y-intercept, no slope. So we call one x1, y1, call one x2, y2. Like I said earlier, I love calling the bigger y value y2. So I'm going to call this one x2, y2, and this one x1, y1. So to find the slope, m equals 10 minus negative 2 over 2 minus 5. So I have 2 negatives in a row there. So 10 plus 2 is 12, and 2 minus 5 is negative 3. Now that reduces to negative 4. Now we're at the same point where we were on all of these. The only difference is, instead of being given 1 point each time, we have 2 points. So you might be wondering, well, Mr. Kossel, how do we know which point to use? Does something go wrong if we use the wrong point? Is there a wrong point? And the answer to those questions is that you can pick either point. Now, what you can't do is say, I'm going to pick this as my y, but this one as my x. because they're from different points. So they don't actually go together as an x comma y. So you have to pick a pair. You can't just pick from one and then go to the other. So if I'm picking -2, I have to pick 5. If I'm picking 10, I have to pick 2. Now it's up to you really what you want to do. Let's say you just want to deal with positives. Maybe go with 2, 10. Maybe you want to do with smaller numbers. 5, -2 would be a good bet. Typically, most people don't like working with negative numbers, so I'm going to deal with 2 and 10. But whatever you pick is fine. So I'm going with my y equals mx plus b, and I'm replacing y and x with this y and x value, or the other point if you choose that. So 10 for my y is equal to -4, because that's my slope, times 2 for the x plus b. I should clarify that's a parenthesis there around the 2, not like a 21. So then I have 10 equals -4 times 2 is -8 plus b. I add 8 to each side and get 18 to be equal to b. Now I can finally plug my m and my b back into y equals mx plus b and get y equals -4x plus 18. So a quick recap of what happened there. We had 2 points, no slope, no y-intercept. So we first found the slope using the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Then we found b using either of the points, but just one, as well as the slope, just like we did before, and plugged them into our y equals mx plus b and solved. Then finally, we were able to use the m and the b and put them in our final equation. Example 5, once again, might be a good opportunity to kind of pause and work on it on your own. Now, as far as going about this problem, we're going to go about it the exact same way. So pick which point you want to call x1, y1, x2, y2, and you don't even have to write it down and label it like I did up here. You can completely just say, hey, m equals, and start writing your slope. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to pick 7 minus 3. I pick 7 to go first because it's a bigger y value, over 4 minus 3. And that gives me 4 over 1, aka 4. So now I pick either of the points, 4, 7 or 3, 3. I'm going to pick 3, 3 simply because the numbers are smaller. So 3 equals 4 times 3 plus b. This time you don't have to worry about which one you plug in for x and which one you plug in for y, because they're both 3. Sorry about that noise. So as I multiply here, 3 equals 12 plus b, subtract the 12, I get -9 equals b. So I'm going to plug that into my equation with along with my m, and get y equals -4, y equals -4x, one more time, I'm sorry, positive 4x because the slope is positive, minus 9 because the b is negative. And that is that example.